There are places where maps stop helping, radios go silent, and experience means nothing. The disappearances don't follow logic, no signs of struggle, just absence. Today, we're talking about experienced hunters and careful berry pickers who stepped into the woods and were never seen again. Welcome to Strange with Danny. A little spooky, a little funny, and a whole lot of real life. Disclaimer: this podcast may include strong language and discussions of mature and potentially disturbing topics, including, but not limited to, violence, abuse, death, and other frightening or sensitive subject matter. This podcast is intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Hey, strangers! So, today's show is another episode on the Missing 411 phenomenon. I finally got my first two books from the Missing 411 series. It's by David Paulides. Missing 411 Eastern United States. This is the one I'm working on right now. And then the other one I have now is Western United States and Canada. So if you haven't heard of the phenomenon, the Missing 411 phenomenon, popularized by writer and former police officer David Paulides, refers to a series of unsolved disappearances primarily in North American wilderness areas characterized by unusual, seemingly inexplicable circumstances like victims vanishing without a trace, often in bizarre weather or locations, with commonalities like victims wearing specific clothes or being found in odd places. So, I've mentioned this before, red clothes and being found like high up on ledges or in the middle of a swampy bog with no way of getting there. So, Paulides suggests it points to something beyond typical of missing persons cases, though critics argue these patterns aren't statistically unusual. They are to me. um, so, everything in this episode is from the first book, Missing 411 Eastern United States Unexplained Disappearances of North Americans That Have Never Been Solved by David Paulides. The following is quoted from the book. Unique factors in disappearances. Rural setting. All of the missing people outlined in this project disappeared from a rural setting, not a city or downtown location. There were usually no witnesses. There was significant cover and difficult terrain. Dogs. For some unknown reason, dogs played a major role in many of the disappearances in the eastern United States. Many of the cases involved children following their dogs into the wild. Bloodhounds or canines can't track scent. A very unusual trend I found in many of these cases was that expert tracking dogs were brought into the scene of the disappearance and were not successful at doing their job. The dogs were given the scent via a person's shoe or worn shirt. They were brought to the location where the person was last seen, and they either refused to track or they couldn't pick up a scent. This behavior has occurred too many times to ignore, and it's not understood why this often occurs. As I mentioned in another episode on Missing 411, this happens in over 80% of the cases, and that's astonishing and scary to me. Disabled or impaired. Several cases in the East involve disabled children who disappear. Initially, I believed that this was occurring because of the disability, but the more I read and understood about these cases, I think the numbers are too high for random occurrence. I don't understand why so many disabled children disappear, but the numbers don't seem coincidental. Remember, this is quoted from his book. This isn't me saying this. But he does say children, and it is also disabled adults as well, physically and mentally. Fever. I have had discussions with physicians about the children who return from being missing who have fevers. When they are examined, physicians noted in the articles can't find a reason for the fever, and the physicians I spoke with couldn't explain it. Only a handful of these incidences were described in articles, but I believe children returning with fevers had occurred many more times than noted. The condition wasn't told to the media, and it was handled as a normal medical anomaly. Conscious, semi-conscious. One of the most unusual conditions found among missing people is being found in a conscious or semi-conscious state I understand that when people go missing for extended periods, hallucinations can occur because of an absence of food and water, but these conditions are prevalent even when the factors do not exist. You will read about cases in which the missing are found unconscious, laying on the ground. When questioned later, they have no recollection of how they came to be missing. In some cases, the missing person does recall the facts surrounding his or her disappearance, and the facts of those cases create fascinating reading. So, in normal cases, this isn't necessarily strange to me, but in these cases, especially if there's no evidence of a head injury or consumption of something toxic, I think it's very strange. Kidnapping. In several incidences, law enforcement officials believed the victim was kidnapped. In many of the cases, the people returned in fairly clean clothes, and even though there was heavy precipitation, they were dry. The truly astonishing factor is that in many cases, there was no shelter found, and it couldn't be explained why the victim was dry. In several of the cases in which the word kidnap was used, law enforcement officials backed off their position, and it was never explained why. In hindsight, many of these cases occurred in a rural area, and the press or local sheriff may not have wanted to alarm the community. So in these cases, sometimes abduction by a person is the only logical explanation, but as mentioned before, there would be signs, scent, footprints, tire tracks, there'd be evidence. Afternoon disappearance. From the information gleaned from the project, the optimum time for a disappearance to occur is in the 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. time frames. Swamps and briar patches. Many of the missing are found in the middle or on the perimeter of a swamp and or briar patch. Some rescuers have commented on the unusual location a child is found in and how they don't understand how he or she got there. These are not locations that people would casually visit. So, this is where my handy dandy tinfoil hat comes in. Aliens. And they get something from swamps, because I'll talk about it in some alien episodes, but a lot of sightings of UFOs and stuff are by swamps for whatever reason. Berries. The fact that berries and berry bushes play a continuous role in many disappearances is overwhelming. People disappear and are found in the middle of berry bushes. They go missing while they are picking berries, and some are found eating berries. The association between some missing people and berries cannot be denied. And in these cases, can we consume and eat poisonous berries and that played a role? Made them delirious or hallucinate? Sure. But there'd be signs of them consuming a poisonous berry, like being sick or puking or other things, and in many cases, they're basically fine as far as health when they're found. Clothing removed. In numerous cases cited, the missing person is found and at least one significant piece of clothing has disappeared. Sometimes people are found inexplicably naked. While this sounds like a minor issue, it often isn't minor once you read the facts surrounding the cases and understand how consistent the details are surrounding each incident. While searchers are scouring every inch of a quadrant from the point last seen until the missing is found, in many instances, the clothing is never found. I know that some search manuals indicate that children do remove their clothing. The facts surrounding these cases do not seem to support that assertion. Okay, so I have kids, 4 of them. I know there's hypothermia, and that can trick people into thinking they're hot and make them remove clothing, but many show no signs of hypothermia. And if they are found, and if they aren't found, and it was hypothermia, then we should find their body. And kids take clothes off, but as a parent, I feel like, so when I think if this was one of my little ones who do take off their clothes, especially Eddie Mae, can't keep clothes on that girl. Would she if she were lost? If it were dark and cold? I don't think so. I feel like for a kid, all they have with them is their clothes. That's like a blankie for them. Security, the only sense of safety and comfort. Um, Missing found in an area previously searched. Another common factor found in many search and rescue SAR missions. Searchers find the missing person and later are adamant that the area in which the person was found had been thoroughly searched. Numerous times in the past, sometimes the missing person is found on a major trail the searchers had used daily. SAR commanders are sometimes mystified by the victim's location when found. Again, my foil hat. Cases like this make me think alien abduction. Or, okay, first, if it's a person abducting them, this is a possibility to me. If the person's found somewhere already searched and they're alive and they're healthy and not malnourished and dehydrated and whatnot, like someone kept them somewhere sheltered for a period of time. I don't know how to explain what's in my head at the moment. Like, then they dropped them in the area searched, knowing it had already been searched and hoping the person probably won't be found. Like, it would be obvious if that's a possibility. Now, if we find a body and the person's been missing for a period of time and it's found anywhere really, but especially in a place that's already been searched and it's clean and the state of decomposition doesn't match for the length of time that they've been missing, they can't determine a cause of death. Like, it looks like they just died right then and there of no apparent reason. Aliens. I don't care. It's aliens. I find it highly plausible that aliens abduct people for minutes or even months or years, do whatever it is they do with them, and if they're alive after all that, they plop them back right here. I also believe this scenario in cases where people are found in a far or inexplicable place from where they were last known to be. So now we will get into some cases. As I said in my last Missing 411 episode, I want to at least mention all these people. Many cases have little to no information, but I feel like they still deserve to be mentioned and not forgotten. Maybe someday they will be found. I'm just starting from the beginning and working my way through the book, so it's not my particular order or anything. David Paulides starts with a special section from Ontario, specifically Timmins. He lists 10 people. We're going to talk about 9 of them now that went missing from within 50 miles of Timmins, which he says is a very remote place and that 2 miles from Timmins is extremely remote. So I have a few things I'd like to mention real quick as we get started. In the majority of these cases, absolutely nothing was found. No scent, no footprints, no clothing, or anything. And at some point in the show, we'll get to talking about the areas of the highest disappearances called clusters. They're usually cave systems around, but even if there's caves and stuff, say someone fell in somewhere, something would be found. They'd drop something as they were falling, some hair, clothing would snag and catch up somewhere. There'd be scent to that point or footprints to be tracked. There'd be a sign of disturbed dirt or rocks or whatever where they fell or slid, but nothing. So keep all that in mind. I'm also going to mention now that you'll hear a town mentioned a few times. I'm not sure the correct pronunciation. I tried to do the old googly. It's spelled Cochrane, and I saw it pronounced as Cochrane and Sochrane, and this is in Canada. If any of you know, please let me know. I'm going to go with Cochrane, and I'll do my best with these pronunciations, but we're talking about Canada, eh? I feel like it's a lot of Native American and French. I also want to mention, lots of mentions, that after reading through these cases, I don't personally find all of them necessarily strange. I do think some may have been foul play or accidental, but the police department's really fumbled when it came to investigating. One case, there wasn't even a single question asked, so there's that. But because the circumstances are unknown and they are mentioned in the missing 411 cases, I still want to mention them. And lastly, if I refer to them in the past tense and they're still missing, it's because their ages at the time of disappearance makes it highly unlikely that they're still with us. And I'll also mention their ages they'd be today because this book was written some years ago now. All right, let's get started with these cases. Merle Newcomb and George Whedon. October 29th, 1959, 2 men, Merle Newcomb, aged 50, and George Whedon, aged 63, went missing from Newcomb's hunting lodge. They had gone hunting and never returned. They were last seen between mile markers 106 and 107 of the CPR line. CPR is Canadian Pacific Railway. George Whedon had injuries from a train accident that affected his back and right leg. It was difficult for him to walk long distances, understandably. They had one of the largest searches of the 60s, finding nothing. Because of the time of year, they had to resume with a second search in the spring after the snow melted, again, finding nothing. Okay, so they were outdoorsmen, not going far from the truck because of Whedon's difficulty with walking. They were armed as they were out there hunting. Bears would have been hibernating because it was winter, and nobody would have gotten around too far in that area that time of year because of the terrain and the snow. One person disappearing may not be all that strange, but two at the same time together with nothing ever found is very strange. If it were animals or elements, you'd think there should be bones, clothing, their guns. What would animals do with guns? The two men have been missing now for 67 years. Today, Merle Newcomb would be 117 years old and George Whedon would be 130. So obviously, regardless, they're no longer with us. Elizabeth Ann Kent. On October 16, 1972, Elizabeth Ann Kent, aged 45, disappeared 73 miles east of Cochrane, Ontario. She was 5'5" and 160 pounds. She was separated from her hunting group near camp number 23 at Abitibi in the area where the Abitibi River enters the lake, very close to the Abitibi-Detroit Provincial Park. There was a large and long search for her, but she was never found. She has been missing now for 54 years. Today, Elizabeth Ann Kent would be 99 years old. Vital Vachon. On May 1st, 1973, Vital Vachon, aged 56, disappeared from Lucas Township near Timmins, Ontario. He was 5'6" and 158 pounds. He left a bush camp in Lucas Township. The camp and surrounding area was searched, but he vanished. Nothing was found. He has been missing for 53 years. Today, Vital Vachon would be 109 years old. Foster Bezanson. On October 25, 1980, Foster Bezanson, age 64, disappeared from Cochrane, Ontario. He was 5'7" and 149 pounds. From what I understand, Foster was on his way to go hunting and armed in a rural and relatively flat area. Don't know why rural is so hard for me to say. He left the Abitibi Road 48 area near Cochrane. He was last seen on Translimit Road 4 east to mileage 60, north to 1 mile on Abitibi Road 48. A search was initiated when he never came back home that day. Nothing was found. Several other people are missing in the same area under similar circumstances. So, how did this man and his gun disappear? I'm not clear about his vehicle. Has that ever been found? He has been missing for 46 years now. Today, Foster Bezanson would be 110 years old. John Samuel Clifford. On October 10, 1987, John Samuel Clifford, age 65, disappeared from Flood's Landing on the Frederick House River in Frederick House River, Ontario. He was 5'10" and 180 pounds. He has been missing for almost 40 years, and he disappeared relatively close to Foster Bezanson. David Paulides noted that it is, quote, difficult to get information on his disappearance, end quote. He has been missing for 39 years. Today, John Samuel Clifford would be 104 years old. Dustin Rhodes. At around 11 a.m. on July 6, 1991, it was discovered that Dustin Rhodes, age 64, disappeared from his rural cottage on Lake Gibson in Timmins, Ontario. He was staying at the cottage, which is approximately 5 miles south of Kettle Lake Provincial Park and 15 miles east of Timmins. There is no evidence of where he is. He has been missing now for 35 years. Today, Dustin Rhodes would be 99 years old. David Paulides noted that, quote, 4 of the 11 people on this list in central Ontario have disappeared in July, end quote. Bernard Champagne. On July 10, 1997, Bernard Champagne, aged 80, disappeared from his living quarters in a rear building of a rustic cabin on the outskirts of Valcott. He was 5'6" and 149 pounds. The owner of the cabin noticed quickly when Bernard was missing because he kept close tabs on the older man. There was a huge search involving canines, helicopters, airplanes, and ground search. They never found anything. So, logically, how did this 80-year-old man who had people keeping tabs on him disappear? How did he even get far enough away that he was never found? He has been missing now for 29 years. Today, Bernard Champagne would be 109 years old. Michael Joseph Linkletter. On July 13, 2003, Michael Joseph Linkletter, aged 44, disappeared between Cochrane and Moosonee, Ontario, from the Linkletter Hunting Fishing Camp, located near mile marker 115 on the CN Railroad line. He was 5'6" and 158 pounds. The last time he was seen was 6 a.m. that morning. He vanished outdoors that day sometime. There were numerous searches and he has never been found. He has been missing 23 years now. Today, Michael Joseph Linkletter would be 67 years old. Now we start a section about people that went missing picking berries. In this section, David Paulides lists 20 people that disappeared while picking berries in the wild. We'll talk about 19 of them now, and then the other one will be mentioned later on in the series in a different section. Stephen Ford. On August 5th, 1880, Stephen Ford, aged 9, disappeared from Pleasant Valley, Pennsylvania. There's not a lot of information. He, quote, disappeared while he was gathering berries near his house, end quote. Here, Paulides noted that the boy disappeared in the same area as 2 females. He went missing 146 years ago. Today, Stephen Ford would be 155 years old, so he definitely is no longer of this world. Johnny Lemke. On August 12, 1910, Johnny Lemke, age 12, disappeared from Elyria, Ohio. This is quoted from the book. Quote, an article in the Evening Telegram on August 12, 1910, stated that Lemke was picking berries when something unexplained happened. They found his half-full pail of berries lying on the ground, but no other indicators of Johnny. The Vermilion River is adjacent to the land that Johnny was on, and the river was dragged for his body several times with no signs of the boy. The article theorized that Johnny may have attempted to run off another berry picker or had disturbed a hawk's nest. As best as I can determine, Johnny was never located. The hawk's nest is an unusual explanation for this incident, as a 15-year-old boy is a large object for a hawk to carry away and consume. I've read many interesting conclusions to missing persons cases, especially in older articles. Many of the explanations have no basis in reality but appear to be printed to offer some logical explanation to a very unusual event. End quote. I mean, this was 1910, and investigations then weren't what they are now. He was 15. I don't think a bird got him. I feel like if it were any animal, there would have been signs and we know about it. I kind of feel like it could have been a person abducted him. He went missing 116 years ago. Today, Johnny Lemke would be 128 years old. So I'd say no matter what happened then, he's no longer with us, sadly. Eddie Hamilton. On July 6, 1928, 2-year-old Eddie Hamilton disappeared from Elrose, Saskatoon in Canada. He and his parents were berry picking just south of their town. They got out of their car in an area thick with berries. Eddie walked off in one direction, and the parents took their eyes off him momentarily, and he was gone. They never saw him again alive. When they realized he was gone, they immediately started looking and calling for him. The area was mostly flat, with hills and lakes in the distance. Unable to find him, his dad continued to look while his mom left to fetch help. The RCMP, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, arrived quickly and started a search before dusk. Over 250 people participated in an SAR, search and rescue, around the clock within 24 hours. They used planes, but nothing was seen. Quote, a July 13, 1928 article in the Saskatoon Phoenix noted that searchers had found boot prints and heel prints in one area and the following. There are footprints, however, in the vicinity, but though the wheat fields and undergrowth for miles around have been thoroughly combed, no further clue has been found. End quote. The writer of this article is discerning because he made a definite distinction between the boot, heel, and footprint that were found. Several articles stated that the search was the largest in history of the province. It lasted over 3 months and nothing was found. No clothing in the brush, no other footprints, no witnesses, nothing. Almost 2,000 people participated in the 3-month effort. On October 25th, 1928, a travel salesman was duck hunting 3.5 miles from where little Eddie Hamilton disappeared. The hunter was on White Bear Lake when he looked into the water and saw a small figure floating. It was Eddie. The boy was retrieved, and the parents had made a positive identification that it was Eddie Hamilton. The article in the Winnipeg Free Press made no mention of the condition of the body or the oddity of the find. End quote. Here he makes a note about how the boy would have had to hike up a 1,800-foot hill and down into the water, and that the general belief among search and rescuers is that children, quote, walk downhill when lost, not usually uphill, especially a 2-year-old going 1,800 feet uphill, end quote. A guidebook written to assist search and rescue commanders states that, quote, that a 1 to 3-year-old child will be found 95% of the time on flat ground in less than a 2-mile radius, end quote. Oh man, this one. Don't come at me for my opinion, that's all it is. I'm not an expert or investigator professionally. Obviously, this was so long ago, and again, investigating and evidence and testing was way different than it is today. But with no better interpretations and no information about the family's home life, just based on the footprints, heel print, and boot prints, the way my brain processes that information, it's like a man's boot, a woman's shoe heel, and a child's footprints. I just get the feeling his parents did something. They walked him up over the hill, mountain, whatever, into that water and got away with it. But I'm not a professional in any field other than scrubbing toilets. So use your own mind, do your own research, and come to your own conclusions. Wesley David Piatt. On August 14th, 1932, 7-year-old Wesley David Piatt disappeared from Strawberry Mountain in Nespelem, Washington. It was the late afternoon, and he was with his mom and grandma picking huckleberries. He wandered a little far from them, and then they heard him scream 2 times. They searched but found no trace of Wesley. 50 men on horses looked for the little boy within 2 days and could not find him. Paulides makes a note here about similarities in this case and another, a boy named Jimmy Duffy, at Wenatchee Lake, which is the same general vicinity. In both cases, the boys were in desolate locations, but screamed before disappearing, and both were never found. I found this interesting because up until now, I haven't even heard a case where a sound was heard. Now there's 2 of them in the same area. So whatever happened, they were able to make a sound first. My son Jace is a small little guy, but he's a year older. He's 8. So let's say Wesley is 4 foot, 60 pounds. I'm not even sure how tall Jace is or how much he weighs, but I think he's around there. To me, the most likely logical explanation would be a very large bird or animal. But researching, it says large birds carrying 60 pounds. While these birds are incredibly strong and can kill large animals, lifting and flying with 60 pounds like a large dog or small person is beyond the documented capabilities of any living bird, as it would be several times their body weight, end quote. If it were a large cat or something, there'd be blood and signs of a struggle, like drag marks. Even if it snatched him up and ran up a tree, it would most likely latch around the neck with its mouth. So 1, there'd be a little blood at least. And 2, his feet would have left drag marks. And 3, I've seen people explain if if kids' feet are dragging, then most likely at least one shoe's gonna come off. Shoes do not stay on kids' feet very well. In this case, it's 1932, so he probably had on like high top lace boots, kind of, or something. Like they probably weren't some low top Velcro shoes, you know. I don't even know when Velcro became a thing. And the screams, if these boys screamed as something grabbed them and the person or people with them immediately reacted and looked, they'd see an animal retreating with the boy. It's like they screamed and vaporized into thin air. So again, on this one, my opinion is aliens. He's been missing for 94 years. Today, Wesley David Piatt would be 101 years old. Jack Pike, aged 5, disappeared from St. Norbert, Manitoba on September 5th, 1935. We will talk about him in another Missing 411 episode. He's been missing for 91 years. Today, Jack Pike would be 96 years old. George Wanke. George Wanke went missing on July 27th, 1935, aged 58, from Brightstone, Ontario, after traveling with 24 other residents from Beausejour, where he was from, to an area known for berry picking. After failing to meet everyone else at the arranged meetup time for the ride home, the group left. So it's unclear to me if they went back to Beausejour and then came back to Brightstone, or if they stayed in Brightstone overnight. Either way, the next morning they came back with 3 truckloads of searchers, but came up empty-handed. So there's not enough to this one for me to even have an opinion on what I think happened to him. He has been missing for 91 years. Today, George Wanke would be 149 years old, so whatever did happen back then, he isn't with us anymore because of age. Emma Steffi. On July 15th, 1939, Emma Steffi, aged 75, who was a very strong older woman who lived adjacent to the Welsh mountain wilderness, disappeared after hiking into the woods to pick huckleberries. Neighbors saw her 8 miles from her home and asked her if she needed a ride, and she told them no. There was a thorough search of the area for 3 days by policemen and farmers, but they couldn't find her. On the 4th day, she just walked right into her home. Her dress was torn, and she said she hit her head badly, but there were a few other details about her missing over the 3 days. Oh, I don't know about this one either. Not enough information for me, but just based on what we do know, I do think it's possible she fell and hit her head and was unconscious for some time and took some time to gather her bearings enough to get herself back home. Or maybe she ran into someone bad that assaulted her in some way, but without any other details of her condition or anything, there's no way to know. But it doesn't necessarily sound scary to me or strange, but maybe. I guess it is because, all those people were looking for her for days and never found her. So like, where was she? And I don't know the length of time that someone can be knocked out for. I should have looked into that. I'm gonna look after this. But I doubt that somebody can stay passed out for days at a time, other than a coma. Oh, I don't know. Might never know. Simon Scogan was 9 years old when he disappeared on July 2nd, 1940, while out picking berries with his grandpa. He and his parents had come to visit his grandparents in a rural part of Manitoba near Telan, 55 miles north of Winnipeg. Immediately after he disappeared, law enforcement and military personnel began searching, but heavy rains hindered the search efforts. For 30 days, soldiers from the Canadian 3rd Division Ammunition Company, that is a mouthful, goodness, stayed on the scene. From the July 29th, 1940 Windsor Daily Star, quote, "A few days ago, however, Indians of the district reported traces of someone living on berries and sleeping in the woods. They even reported someone who ran away at the sight of them. Nearby residents said they often found their cows milked almost dry in the morning." End quote. Over 200 searchers assisted in the effort. For over a month, 80 were soldiers. They could not find him or whoever was living in the woods off berries. Simon Scogan was never found. So, 1, why does it say someone who ran away at the sight of them? Details, please. Was it a man, a woman, young, old? Like, they got to at least know a little bit, because it doesn't say if they thought it was the boy or not. 2, is the 9-year-old boy going to make it around undetected and milk several cows long enough that they're dry? I don't know what to think about this one either without knowing what the area is like, but for 80 soldiers to be out there for 30 days and never find him, I don't know. He has been missing for 85 years. Today, Simon Scogan would be 94 years old. Mrs. August Nelson disappeared July 28, 1943, from Drummond, Wisconsin. She was 75 years old and was disabled and needed a cane to walk. She disappeared after walking out of her home and into the woods to pick blueberries. 50 men and a sheriff searched the region but never found her. Aliens! Again. 50 men and a sheriff can't find an old woman with a cane. She was beamed up. Not to sound insensitive, but that's the only explanation in my mind, because, I don't know, 75-year-old woman with a cane, and all those people can't find her, and how far could she have gotten? She has been missing for 83 years. Today, Mrs. Nelson would be 158 years old, so again, no matter what happened, because of age, she isn't with us anymore. Squirrel! What if someone was abducted by aliens and gone for years, then plopped back here like decades later, but like wherever they were, they aged way slower. So like they show up back here and they're like the same age as their kids and stuff now. Or like their kids aren't even here anymore. Pondering. Anyways, C.H. Bordwell, August 1st, 1944, C.H. Bordwell, age unknown, disappeared 18 miles from his home while picking berries with his wife and a group of friends. Not enough info at all. Not at all. So I don't know, but I do find it strange that there's no info and an age wasn't recorded. Like, when in the history of history has any police or anybody taken down a report and not taken down an age? That's very strange. Curiouser and curiouser. And who were the friends? What was the marriage like? How was their home life? I feel like this could be some human foul play, though. I don't know, but we'll never know. Um, a search never found him, and he has been missing for 82 years. We don't know how old he was. I guess he could still be alive somewhere. I guess the wife and friends could possibly be alive. Maybe one day we'll have an answer to this one. I don't know. Does anybody have any information about that? David Fife, 84-year-old David Fife, disappeared from Rehoboth, Massachusetts, on July 6, 1952. After leaving his residence to go to a known huckleberry patch, after failing to return, a search was started. Bloodhounds did track his scent to a swamp area, but a search of the perimeter area didn't find any evidence of where he might be. Volunteers, Boy Scouts, and firemen participated in the search. Paulides mentions here that he found 2 articles about this, but was unclear if Fife had been found. He then says, quote, "You will read many accounts of missing people where swamps play a predominant role and where people disappear and where others are eventually found," end quote. So I found this interesting because, as I said in my first Missing 411 episode, it's over 80% of cases, dogs can't find a scent or they refuse to track it. It also says they searched the perimeter, which would mean only around the border of the swamp. So not the swamp itself? For his sake, I hope to every and anything that they did. If they didn't, then I believe he was in there and passed away. And if they did, then aliens. Again, I just don't know if they did search it, how he would get so far and not found. And nothing was found. He went missing 74 years ago. David Fife would be 159 years old because of age. He's no longer with us. Gary Bailey, July 17th, 1954. Gary Bailey, age 3, disappeared in Knox, Maine, while picking blueberries with his family and friends of theirs. At one point during the excursion, his blind father was tending to him while his mother was by the friends. Somehow his dad lost track and a search began. He disappeared from Spears Mountain, that sits next to Fry Mountain State Management Area, 15 miles east of Belfast. The 500 searchers included game wardens, state police, Boy Scouts, firemen, and other volunteers. They found nothing that night or the following morning. However, about 24 hours after he went missing, two of the searchers thought they heard crying. Gary was found. He was found on the opposite side of the mountain with scratches on his face, but in generally good condition. From a Sarasota Herald article from July 19th, 1954, quote, searchers said the youngster was found on the opposite side of Spears Mountain from where he vanished, and his trail indicated that he had passed over the top of the 1,400-foot hill in his wanderings, end quote. It stated in another article that he was found 3 miles from where his dad lost track of him. So, okay, I have a 20-year-old, almost 20-year-old, an 8-year-old, almost 4-year-old, and a 9-month-old. When I really think of my little ones in this situation, do I think they'd get scared and just sit and wait, or keep walking and walking, hoping to find their way back? I think they'd keep walking and walking. As long as there isn't water too deep for them and they had enough daylight, I think they could wander 3 miles in 24 hours, absolutely. Even over a big hill, and if they did keep trying to move in the dark, they might not know up from down and that they're climbing uphill. I I was trying to think, like, if I remember ever being outside and at night and, like, going up a hill, if it feels a lot like if you can tell. Not sure. Scratches wouldn't be strange to me. To me, it would be more strange to be found without any. So I do feel like he just wandered off and got lost, but I can't figure out how 500 people couldn't find him right away because I wouldn't expect him to get too far initially. And I can't think of a situation where a kid would be scared of people looking for him and keep hiding if he sees them. Like, police and game wardens, or some of them at least, I'm sure would be in uniform, and a 3-year-old would know this person is safe for me to come out. I don't know. Either way, I'm glad that this has a good ending and he was found. Rose Jewett. Rose Jewett was a 95-year-old disabled stroke victim when she disappeared August 11th, 1957. She left with family and friends who took her on a trip into the wild about 10 miles north of Elk River, Idaho, on desolate, rough roads. They made camp on Thursday, and everything went seemingly normal until Sunday, when at around 4:15 in the afternoon they decided to go pick huckleberries. They left Rose at camp because it would have been too hard for her to get around because of her disabilities. After about 45 minutes, they returned to find that Rose had disappeared. 50 people searched for Rose for 5 days and never found anything. For 3 days, bloodhounds basically circled the camp and kept stopping at the road. For that reason, some people believed Rose had got a ride out of there, but her family didn't believe that. Rose's daughter offered $300 reward for information about her mother, whether she was dead or alive. Remember, this is only 1957. I'm not sure how much $300 would have been back then, but sometimes that's everything somebody has, you know. Rose Jewett was never found. She went missing 69 years ago. Today, she'd be 164 years old. Whatever happened back on that day, age has taken her from us now. So, this is another one that I feel smells a little foul play to me. Now, I love the outdoors. My family all loves the outdoors. And I can say almost with complete certainty that we wouldn't be taking any of our 95-year-old disabled stroke surviving family members to BFE down rough roads, period, and then leave them alone while we go pick berries. At that age and in that health, they could pass any minute. I'd keep them back in civilization but I guess you never know until it's you. I can't speak for everybody. I just know that I'm not saying that just because of their age and health, they have to be in a hospital or a facility. I plan to keep my parents, at my home as long as they're okay with it. But I wouldn't be, and they love outdoors. Yeah, I might take them camping, like close by. I'm not going to take them out in BFE down rough roads. And then I'm not going to leave them sitting there by themselves because one thing I know for certain is I don't want anybody dying alone that I care about and love. And I'd feel terrible if I came back and they passed away sitting in a chair while we were gone picking berries. But that, like I said, I can't speak for everyone. That's just me. But I need more info. I'm not trying to offend or insult any of those family members, but I'm gonna go there. Did anyone happen to get an inheritance or anything after this? Because maybe she was never even really out at that trip. It was Thursday to Sunday. Maybe Thursday she was taken to some other desolate location before the family went camping. I'd be curious to know if at some point, if a woman her age and description was found in a random place inexplicably and never identified, because this was 1957, maybe another county or jurisdiction even, and they didn't share info between places back in the day. We may never know. For her sake, I hope that wasn't her fate. Richard Ricky Craig, at 10 a.m. August 15th, 1957, about 25 miles south of Mount Adams, Washington, 5-year-old Ricky disappeared. He was with his parents picking huckleberries around the 2,500-foot elevation near Trout Lake and the Hood and Columbia Rivers. It was around 10 a.m. when they couldn't find Ricky. They then went to the local Forest Service office and asked for help. For 2 days, they searched with law enforcement, bloodhounds, and volunteers. By the second day, there were 600 searchers. The Forest Service had to close Trout Lake area because there were so many people looking for the boy that they were hindering the search effort. Quote, at 5:30 a.m. on the third day Ricky was missing, a logging crew came into SAR on their day off. The crew was 3/4 of a mile off Trout Creek Road and over 5 miles from the point Ricky was last seen when they found the young boy. I made a monumental archive search for specific details of Ricky's condition, but little could be found. It was learned that the boy was missing one shoe, and according to doctors that examined him later in the day, they were fascinated by the phenomenal condition he was in for being in the rugged wilderness for over 2 days. They couldn't believe it. End quote. He never did recall how he got lost or what happened in those few days that he was missing. And I tried looking into this case, and literally the only thing I found was a picture for sale on eBay of like the search. Literally nothing else. Why isn't there any info online for such a big case with 600 searchers? Why didn't he ever come out and say what happened? More questions than answers. To me, something so hush hush is because the law enforcement and or government doesn't want to scare the public. If we knew what his personality was like afterwards, that could say a lot. Like if he changed from before and after. I mean, if he just didn't remember anything, then he'd go on just like before, right? And if he just shut down or was sullen and introverted and antisocial after, but he wasn't like that before, then maybe he remembers but won't tell, right? We may never know. I wasn't even able to find out if he's still alive. He'd be 74 years old today. But I am glad that he was found. Another good case, at least he was found. Mabel Moffett, August 10th, 1966. Mabel Moffett, aged 55, disappeared from Gilmore Creek, Alaska. She and her husband, Earl, had asked friends to go berry picking, but the friends couldn't. But them knowing of the plans is how I think someone knew when they were missing. So Mabel and Earl drove to Gilmore Creek, the RCA Gilmore site, which was adjacent to the state highway. That is where they were last seen alive together. When they didn't come home, they were reported missing by those friends, and the state police started to search right away. The first day they found the husband, Earl, who allegedly had had a heart attack and was lying dead on the trail. Eventually, they found the wife, Mabel, 2 air miles from the Gilmore Dome. They rushed her to the hospital and she was released. Newspapers mentioned that she had never even been questioned, so nothing is known of the incident. This one, to me, something came upon them, either scared him so bad he had a heart attack and she ran, or it took her and he had a heart attack. But once again, there isn't really any info. Not of the scenes where they were both found or her condition physically or mentally. I don't know. I mean, it could be foul play, but we just don't know. But I don't know why there were no questions asked by the staff at the hospital or by police or anything. I mean, I don't know. Doesn't make sense. But I guess most of these don't. And that's why we're here. Marceline Cummings. Marceline Cummings was 54 years old when she went missing on July 14th, 1969, from Monument Mountain, Washington. There isn't a lot on this case other than she was a missing berry picker from Spokane, Washington, and the area she disappeared in is relatively close to where several other women have also gone missing, near the Idaho-Washington border. She disappeared 57 years ago. Today, Marceline would be 111 years old. Don't quote me or take my word for this, but I do feel like I heard about somewhere that they had looked into the possibility of a serial killer that was in that area, um, that murdered women, but it was never conclusive. I'll have to look into that. Yehudi Pryor is mentioned in the list, but they are the number 20 that we'll talk about in a later episode. Raymond Tunnicliffe, age 79, disappeared after visiting a general store in Wyaquan and telling the owner essentially, call for help if he isn't back in 3 days. He was heading out to go berry picking at Tracy Lake, Saskatoon, Canada. 3 days later, after the owner called for help, the RCMP started a 2-week search using ground teams, planes, and canines that turned up nothing. His family has said, quote, "There's absolutely nothing. We've almost narrowed it down to alien abduction because it's so clean," end quote. Well, I think maybe the family statement is all the statement we need. If it's too clean, it's just, there's no other explanation, in my opinion. Otherwise, there'd be DNA, scent, marks, signs, something. They never found his camp. They never found any of his equipment. Him, no signs, no scuffs, no marks, no trails, no scent, nothing. He disappeared 24 years ago. Today, Raymond Tunnicliffe would be 103 years old. Frank Speck was 69 years old when he went missing on September 23, 1996, from Kirkland Lake, Ontario. He left his home to go pick some blueberries in some local woods and was never seen again. The RCMP had a huge search but never could locate Frank. He went missing 30 years ago. Today, Frank Speck would be 99 years old. Speck. I like saying that. Speck. Okay, this one's tough. Luciano Trnajstic. On July 24th, 2007, in Timmins, Ontario, 78-year-old Luciano Trnajstic disappeared. Luciano was a resident of the Porcupine subdivision and had left to go to a local hotspot for blueberry picking, which was along Murphy Road East off Highway 655. A 7-kilometer area grid search was conducted, as well as a larger search by air, and the only thing ever found was his Jeep Grand Cherokee. They mentioned that there is an old mine in the area that was open at the time, but it is now closed. David Politis notes here that Luciano disappeared relatively in the same area as Frank Speck, and that they're both older men that disappeared picking berries, and no trace has ever been found of either except the Jeep. He disappeared 19 years ago. Today, Luciano Trnajstic would be 97 years old. Both the last two, I'm not sure what to think because we don't know their health conditions or anything, and there's no other information. So that's it for this episode. The next Missing 411 episode will talk about the next two sections of the first book about missing sheep herders and missing farmers. I know these cases we talked about today didn't really have spooky details like the Rowan Griffin one. I'm hoping we get into some soon that do. We're going through this together. It's our journey. So I'm learning about these just before you are. But I do know that there are cases that when I do get to them, you're going to get chills. So thank you so much for hanging out with me on Strange with Danny. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to like, follow, and share it with a fellow strange friend. I appreciate you so much, whether you're driving, working, or hiding from your kids for a few. Thank you for being here. Until next time, keep an open mind and be kind. Somewhere between the quiet trees and the vanished footprints, a story ends without a goodbye, leaving only silence. and the question of what truly walks these woods with us. Stay strange. Bye.